and some Swedish and some Greek and some British and some from everywhere. So anyway, I'll do my introduction to you all. I feel it's been a while since I've seen you, but it hasn't actually been that long. So anyway, normally I say 4 o'clock Copenhagen or 5 o'clock Copenhagen time, but today I'm gonna say 4 o'clock Holland time, because I'm actually in Holland. And that's where we have moved our warehouse to. So we help you all practitioners to fulfill your supplement orders through our Dutch warehouse. It's not an easy thing because we are having to change some of the supplements and move over and find substitute products and so on. But just as I always say, like, rest assured that we're really trying to help you out and find alternative products if some products are not allowed in Holland compared to what we were used to in England and so on. And of course, for all those who are in Britain and outside the EU, just remember then we are still supplying you from our British warehouse in Sussex. Yeah. So anyway, I'm Anne-Catherine, co-founder of Nordic Laboratories and DNA Life, a group of companies that is dedicated to change of healthcare through functional medicine and personalized medicine. We are recording, and we will share the recording with you all in an email as soon as possible. And remember, if there's any tests that we talk about today or supplements, you can get it through your practitioner account or just reach out to us or your practitioner support person, and we will for sure help you. So for quite a while, people ask, can we do an autism talk and do an autism lecture? And I was like, yeah, we can do that, and who should do it, and so on. And then it's something I've been talking about with Daniela about doing for a while, and I just thought she's the one who's going to do it. So I'm going to do the introduction to her in a minute, but I'm just going to tell you, because Daniela and I have a little bit of a similar experience. But back in 2002, that was when I first saw how a child can transform from severe autism, ADHD, and through diet and lifestyle changes, transform into a well-functioning child who feels much more comfortable in his own body, and where people like him more and cuddle him more because it's possible, because he's not all over the place and aggressive and difficult to, how can you say, control. And seeing that child transform that way by eating healthy food and taking supplements, and parents supporting him in the environment of the home, was really something that took my heart with storm, and I thought I need to understand more about this. So I went to Boston for all these Defeat Autism Now, was what it was called back then, and then I just started trying to understand all these things with autism, and how do we work with these kids. So I was introduced to Elaine Gotcher, who's written the book about specific carbohydrate diet. I met Elizabeth Mumber, who's actually a friend. She's also an educator for IFM. She's a very highly recommended pediatrician, and Dr. Newbrander on methylcobalamin injections, and Paul Shattuck and Karl Reichelt, and all these names, and I'm name dropping a little bit because actually within all the autism field and all the people who has joined that movement, there's some really heavy people there who really knows a lot, and who's really dedicated into functional medicine, and who's dedicated into changing children's lives for the better. And that makes me move on to Daniela, who is one of these people. She's an educated nutritionist, and in Portugal there's this little thing, like nutritionists are actually dietitians. So it's a little bit the other way around. So she's a dietitian, which is called nutritionist in Portugal. and she's been practicing clinical nutrition in hospital settings until she met Dr. Cristina Sales, who had a functional medicine clinic in Portugal. And she's one of these people who's really foresighted, and I would say she's the godmother of functional medicine in Portugal and actually abroad as well. And some of you might already have met her son, Miguel Damas, who was doing a talk at one of these webinars on autoimmune conditions and how you treat, or how he treats autoimmunity. So yeah, you might have met him. So, and then Daniela has been working closely with Cristina Sales and moving into everything to do with neurodevelopment, neurodegeneration, cognitive decline, everything to do with supporting mitochondria and the gut and so on. And she has taken many of these courses in the US to get better and understand the autism treatments even better. And I'm proud to say that she's also an IFM certified practitioner, and she completed her exam with distinction. Not everybody does that. So, and she's my colleague because she's a practitioner in Nordic Clinic in Porto, and I am delighted to pass the stage on to her. So she's going to share her screen now and take over. And remember, ask questions on the side. I will be the moderator and take them down and ask Daniela in the end. Yeah, so remember we are recording, and the slides we will try and share as well, and reach out to us if you need any help. Daniela, the stage is yours.
So let's start this. So thanks, Anne-Catherine, for the presentation, and let's do this. I hope my English, you understand my English. So this is an English of a Portuguese accent, so I hope you all understand. So I have some, if you can ask questions at the end, I'll be happy to answer. So first, let's start with a designation. So autism is a complex neurodevelopment disorder associated with deficits in social communication, social interaction, and restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. So this is the definition. In terms of treatment, we normally think about the medications for the symptoms more important, and behavioral therapies, speech therapies, and etc. But I think it's about time we bring nutrition to the table, because it's really, really important, the nutritional part in these kids. So in terms of causes of autism, I divided in these ones because we have really important genetic component. We have genetic mutations. Several genetic mutations have been implied in autism. There's not one genetic mutation, there are a bunch of them. There are several epigenetic changes. There's several environmental factors and several genetic susceptibilities. Normally, the genetic susceptibilities are related to the environmental factors. So we are talking about kids and mothers. They are more susceptible to the different environmental factors. So all this combined change in the neurodevelopment. So the in utero development during pregnancy is really, really important. So this is the main focus. I will start by this, because for some kids, the changes start during pregnancy. So because we have different windows of vulnerability. So this is important because the same environmental factor at week 5 will not have the same impact at week 35 or something. And of course, we have to mix environmental factors with genetic susceptibilities and what happens in between. So it's a recipe. It's really a recipe. So the windows of vulnerability happen because we have different timing for things to happen. So if there's some environmental factor that affects pyramidal neuronal proliferation, it will not have an impact on 38 weeks. But if it happens at 20 weeks, it will have an impact. So we have different timings for different steps of neurodevelopment. So depending on the intensity of the stimulus, depending on the genetic susceptibilities and the time of pregnancy, we will have different outcomes. And of course, in pregnancy, it's really, really important what happens in the uterus. So I think we can see what can be done during pregnancy. I'm pretty confident. I think I'm hopefully we can prevent some causes of autism working on the mothers. So it's really, really important to work on this environment. So what happens? What are the risk factors for autism during pregnancy? Several nutritional deficiencies. We are talking about omega-3s, we are talking about folate, we are talking about vitamin D, we are talking about several nutrients. So the mother cannot have any deficiencies during pregnancy. We are also talking about different genetic susceptibilities. We are talking about genes related to inflammation, genes relating to detoxification, genes relating to oxidative stress, and also you name it. So are different genetic susceptibilities. So someone asked me before this webinar if there's a specific gene or some specific genes. Yes, there are some that you can consider more important, but there are kids that have autism that don't have those genes. So I don't think there's a pattern. Yes, you can choose some, but it's not the full picture. And environmental toxicity plays a huge, huge role. It's really important. I think this is the area besides genetics that's really, really got a lot of papers, a lot of studies published. So there's a lot of things impacting neurodevelopment during pregnancy. We are talking about pesticides, not only glyphosate. Glyphosate is one thing. That's one of the questions they asked me before, but it's not only glyphosate. I would say there's a lot of pesticides involved. Heavy metals, we are talking about air pollution, we are talking about tobacco, we are talking about several things. So I think we must clean the mother. We have to protect the mother the most we can during pregnancies to avoid this environmental toxicity. Endocrine disruptors, many things. And maternal obesity, this is also a major risk factor. But I have to say, I'm not a huge fan of women losing weight during pregnancy. Of course, except for the cases where the obesity, it will impact pregnancy outcome, of course. But if the pregnancy outcome is not affected by the type of obesity and the amount of obesity, I'm not a big fan of the woman losing weight. Why? Because the adipose tissue is the place where you store the most toxins. All the lipophilic toxins get stored in the adipose tissue. So when the mother loses weight, most of those toxins go to the bloodstream. So there's a risk that these toxins reach the baby. So I prefer that the mother keeps the toxins for herself during pregnancy and during breastfeeding, and then get rid of them. So, but better yet, prepare the pregnancy 1 year before, 6 months before, or whatever. Prepare the pregnancy, lose the weight, improve detoxification, clean up the mother, and then she'll be prepared to carry a child. And infections are also a big part of a risk factor, and especially inflammation. Inflammation, it's a big one. Inflammation is really, really, really a major risk factor for autism. And we all know, as a Nordic family, we all know that inflammation can come from a lot of places. So tangle inflammation during pregnancy, I think, is one of the most important things we can do to prevent changes in neurodevelopment in the child. So work with the mother before, work with the mother during. And stress. High cortisol levels can impact neurodevelopment by itself, but also stress can increase inflammation. So we'll connect to the other risk factors. And risk and inflammation can increase your reactivity to environmental toxicities. And of course, some medications and the parent's age. So we can do, I think I urge you to take care of the mothers. And normally I see autism kids since 2008. And normally I see the mothers that want to have a second child or a third child, another child, and they prepare the pregnancy with me, and I go with them during pregnancy. And the thing is, none of the following child has anything. So we clean up, we prepare so many things. We got rid of all those risk factors, and the second kid is okay, doesn't have anything. So, but the neurodevelopment doesn't stop at birth. So we have the neurodevelopment keeps on going till 25. Of course, the first years are the most intense ones, but it keeps on going. So during the rest of the years, we'll still have the genetic and epigenetic changes working on it. We'll still have the genetic susceptibilities of the child, but we'll still have the impact of several environmental factors, several metabolic dysfunction that the kid may have. All of this will impact neurodevelopment, and all of this can be worked on. All of this can be worked on. And again, during neurodevelopment after birth, we also have different windows of vulnerability. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these metabolic dysfunctions that happen in these kids. So, of course, I'm going to start with nutrition. Then we're going to cover GI microbiota. We're going to cover immunity, sleep, oxidative stress, mitochondria, methylation, and neurotransmitters. There's more, but I think it sums it up, the main ones. And all these ones can be worked on with nutrition. Nutrition can help all of these ones. I will pass on the top because can be very deep subject. So I'll try to cover all a little bit, but give you an idea what nutrition can do with all of these metabolic dysfunctions. So we start with nutrition. The brain needs nutrients. The brain needs nutrients to work. We don't have cells without nutrients. So the nutrition is crucial to give appropriate raw materials. But nutrition also ensures enzymatic and metabolic functions, ensures an adequate intercellular communication. Without nutrition, the brain doesn't work, or the body doesn't work, period. But nutrition also has the ability to modulate the microbiome, modulate the immune response, modulate metabolism, modulate hormonal production and neurologic function. And of course, nutrition can also influence gene expression through the field of the nutrigenomics. So by the way we do the food, we give the food, by the diet we implement, we can upregulate some genes, we can downregulate the others. So we can influence neurodevelopment, we can influence the health of this child just by using nutrition as a tool. But of course, in autism, nothing is easy. So we have a lot of kids with autism with food selectivity, a lot of really, really extreme picky eating. And of course, we have kids with several nutritional deficiencies. This is important, especially on the picky eating kids. They are the ones that are most prone to nutritional deficiencies. And one size doesn't fit all. I don't like when you have a kid with autism, give this, and this nutrient. No, they are all different. So I like to test. I like to see what's going on in that kid. And I know many times with kids with autism, blood draw can be a problem. So blood work can be very problematic. That's why I'm a huge fan of a test I use. It's an organic acid test, and it's urine. So let's give you some examples of the B vitamins. For instance, I don't know if you're familiar with this test. This is an organics comprehensive. I use them a lot in this case. I think most of my kids do this test on the beginning. So for instance, on this kid, I have high needs of B6, really high needs of B6, really high needs of biotin, and really high needs of folate. But for instance, you may be having some nutrient deficiencies of amino acids. But for instance, this kid will have a huge need of B1, B2, B3, and B5. So he really needs the small Bs, but he needs some B6, but it doesn't need so much like the other one. He also needs biotin. But for instance, this one, he can help a little B6, but what this kid needs is especially the biotin and the B12 and the folate. So every kids are different. So I think it's much better to test than to guess. So don't you don't go to the risk of supplementing something that the kid doesn't need. So testing is the best way to guide your intervention. And the causes of nutritional deficiencies are many. Of course, food selectivity and picky eating is one of them, but we also have individualized nutritional requirements. All kids are different, not only by the metabolic disturbances they have, but also by the genetic susceptibilities they have and genetic polymorphisms they present, but also because they may have poor digestion, malabsorption, and that dysbiosis, and that leads us to the other one, that leads us to GI and the microbiota. And the GI tract is crucial. It's crucial for digestion, it's crucial for absorption, it's crucial for immunity, and is the main place to host the biggest amount of the microbiota, the gut microbiota. So it will have a huge impact on the nutritional status, on inflammation, on the gut-brain axis. It's part of the gut-brain axis, and all of this will impact neurodevelopment because it gives you the tools. It has an impact on the inflammation. And of course, it's part of the gut-brain axis, as we will see. And between 9 and 71% of individuals with autism present gastrointestinal disorders. Diarrhea, constipation, reflux, and gastritis are one of the most common complaints. And the gut-brain axis is huge. So there's a big communication between the gut and the brain. There are different pathways, but there are different pathways that has a connection, and the vagus nerve is one of the big ones. 90% of the communication between the gut and the brain in the vagus nerve happens from the gut to the brain, and only 10% from the brain to the gut. So these bidirectional interactions between the gut and intestinal microbiota and the brain influences neurodevelopment. So in a very simple way, healthy gut, healthy central nervous system, abnormal gut function, abnormal central nervous system function. So we have alterations in behavior, cognition, emotion, nociception, altered levels of inflammatory cells, of mediators, and dysbiosis. So in autism, yes, of course, there are changes. There are changes in the microbiome of children with autism. And these changes can influence gastrointestinal symptoms and some of the behavioral symptoms of autism. And there seems to be a production of compounds apparently able to influence the metabolism, brain function, and the immune system. The most studied is propionic acid, but there are others. And this is a nice image. I really like some images that tell the story, that tell all the story. So when you have on the typical developing child, we have a really nice microbiome, but on the autism spectrum, for several reasons, we have dysbiosis that will change behavior. And nutrition, of course, those bugs eat what we eat. So diet can have a huge impact on the composition of the microbiome. Just changing the diet can have a major impact. These are some of my kits, also the organic acid tests. This is a big bacterial dysbiosis. See the amount of proliferation of some bacteria and a little bit of Candida. And for instance, this one, see the amount of Candida that it has. It will impact the brain function, of course it will. And this is another one. It's huge. So we are talking about sometimes, these are real results of my patients. So in this case, we'll have a major bacterial overgrowth, a major bacterial dysbiosis. And for instance, I bring up this case because D-lactate on these values will have a neurotoxic effect. So working on the gut, we can really have an impact because they are really, sometimes their gut is really not working well. So this is another, those were the urine samples. This one is a feces sample. This is one stool analysis. And this is another kit I have. So this gives you a glance. If you're not familiar with this test, it gives you lots of information. I didn't bring all the tests because it's really huge, but gives you here on this kit, for instance, another autist kid that has several problems with maldigestion, several problems with dysbiosis and metabolic imbalances. And for instance, on this kit specific, I just brought you the small part. For instance, in the amounts of proteins of products of protein breakdown. It's massive. So this kid is eating protein, but the protein, the amino acids are not being absorbed. The amino acids are being degraded by the bacteria and are producing another molecules that will impact whatever. But suddenly this kid may be eating protein, but will not absorb. They are being changed in the microbiome. And the kid is also not absorbing fat. So those really nice long chain fatty acids for brain function is not getting in, are not getting in. And this is another, I don't remember it's the same, but this is another kid with huge immune activation on the gut. So the levels of secretory IgA are really huge, but it doesn't have signs of inflammation as we name it in calprotectin, but we have we have high levels of eosinophil protein, eggs. So maybe we are talking about parasite, and it was this kid. We have some parasites. And I have some kids, I think this week I had one, but I think I already have 2 or 3 kids that the parents notice a worsening of behavior, something from 2 months or something, the kids start really behaving really badly and having several attacks. And suddenly the kid, the parents were able to see on the stool the parasites. I had parents taking pictures of the parasites. And after the kid removed the parasites and they killed the parasite, their behavior improved a lot. So look at the gut, because we may be dealing with some major growth of several parasites, bacteria, dysbiosis, or whatever. And because 70% of our immune system is in the gut, we go to immunity. And there's a big connection between the brain and the immune system. The immune system has a huge role in neurodevelopment. Why? Because the microglia, the immune cells on the brain, gives directions to neurons in terms of neurodevelopment. During pregnancy and during the first times, it's the immune system that helps tell the neurons, okay, go to the left, go to the right, go to that part. And during neurodevelopment, the microglia, it's always helping the neurons, supporting the neurons. So if the microglia is inflammatory, is pro-inflammatory, it's working on something, it's not going to help the neuron the same way. So we can have a huge impact when you have neuroinflammation. It can really impact the brain. And this is a major part in autism, the part of inflammation. And this is a chart that of several abnormalities of immune dysregulation in autism. There are several in terms of biochemic cytokine abnormalities. We are talking about microglia activation, we are talking about inflammation, and we are talking about autoimmunity. So this is another that gives you a screenshot of some of the antibodies that were found in children with autism. That's why maybe in some cases, some autoimmune issues can be an autoimmune, some autisms can be autoimmune diseases. Not all of them, but some may be. And children with autism can present with an increase in intestinal permeability. That's due to that dysbiosis, of course, it can happen. And some of our kids have it, of course they have. I have here a kid, this is another test that the kids drink water with 5 sugars, and we can analyze all these markers. And this kid, for instance, has an increase in intestinal permeability and some intestinal damage. But this one, for instance, is not, the absorption capacity is really lowered. It has intestinal permeability, it has gastropermeability, and it has intestinal damage. And nutrition, again, can play a huge role in this. Changing the microbiome, giving nutrients to heal the gut, and help promote and improve this. And of course, if you have leaky gut and dysbiosis, of course, it's normal that you have significant high levels of immune reactions to foods in children with autism, including allergies, IgE allergy, but also food sensitivities, especially wheat, gluten, and dairy. But not only, we can also have corn, eggs, you name it. The kids can have really big reactions to many foods. Some kids have mastocyte activation, so there's a lot. I think we can spend almost 1 hour, 2 hours talking about immune dysregulation in autism. And this is what's also interesting, because different postmortem studies, imaging studies, and CSF analysis suggest an increase in inflammatory markers in the brain of individuals with autism. So I would say this is one of the major findings in autism, is this inflammation. And we can work on inflammation. But I think it's time to, because when we talk about autism and the brain, we normally talk about the neuron function and neurons, but I think we must pay really attention to the glial cells that support the neuron. Like I told you before, we have the microglia, the immune system of the brain, that is there to help the neurons. It gives you BDNF, it communicates with the neuron, it helps the neuron. Sometimes I tell the neuron is like a king. He has to be everyone, he has to have someone doing everything for him. It's just doing what it needs to do. And all the other stuff is doing by the other cells. So the microglia has a huge help, and the astrocyte also helps a lot, the neuron. So it will give him support, it will help him with oxidation, it will pick up the excess glutamate, so the astrocyte has a huge role in making the neuron work well. But in autism, what we have sometimes we have reactive microglia, we have reactive astrocytes that instead of helping the neuron, they are not helping, they are disturbing the neuron. So instead of giving him the neuron, instead of nurturing the neuron and helping the neuron, what they are doing, they are releasing tumor necrosis factor alpha. They are releasing glutamate. They are releasing cytokines. And glutamate can lead to excitotoxicity. And cytotoxicity of glutamate can lead to neuronal death. So we have to think, of course, the neuron, but we really have to think about the microglia and the astrocyte. And if we think that about the astrocyte is one of the main components of the blood-brain barrier, it's in English is more difficult, the BBB. So if you understand that the astrocyte is really important to maintain a healthy BBB, if you have a reactive astrocyte, you may be dealing with some leaky brain. You increase permeability of this barrier, which will lead to increased inflammation, increased neuroinflammation. So this is a very nice article. I really like this chart that tells you a lot. So we have here several immune system dysfunction leading to an increase in susceptibility in autism, leading to a response in the immune system of the central nervous system. But we also have the infections, the altered the natural cell activity, the microglia activation, and all this will help and will join together to, for instance, neuronal cell damage and brain underconnectivity. So it will not help. It will not help the neuron. It will not downregulate. It will lower the function of the neurons. It will not help the neurons. And inflammation can change behavior. Several different animal models reveal the association between immune disorders and behavior. So don't forget that sometimes these kids have a lot of tantrums and a lot of anxiety, and every time they're having a crisis, they're activating the fight or flight response. So they are increasing adrenaline production, they are increasing cortisol production, and that has an impact. And anxiety is present between 20 and 50% of individuals with autism. And what we have is that when we have an increased stress, we have an increase in immune response. And that increase in immune response will lead to an increase in inflammation. So the more stress they have, the more tantrums they have, the more increased inflammation they have. That's why I put this one. So you have an increase in stress and anxiety, leading to an increase in inflammation and neuroinflammation. But the opposite also happens, because when you have neuroinflammation, the brain turns on the signals and activates the sympathetic nervous system, causing anxiety and causing the release of more adrenaline. And of course, doing again the connection between the gut-brain axis, when everything is okay, you have a stable environment with a stable intestinal microbiota and the physiological control inflammation, everything's fine. But suddenly when you put stress on the table, you will have an abnormal gut physiology, an unstable environment, altered bacterial composition, and an increase in physiological inflammation. And there's always, again, the gut and brain axis. So an increase in inflammation in the gut can lead directly to an increase in inflammation in the gut can lead to an increase in neuroinflammation. So there's the huge connection between what happens in the gut and what happens in the brain, especially in terms of inflammation. So I will add up to this chart I put the microbiome. So when you have stress and anxiety, you're going to change the microbiome. And with changing the microbiome for the worse, through the gut and brain axis, you're going to increase inflammation and neuroinflammation, leading to more stress and anxiety, changing the microbiomes, and go on. The direction you want to go goes both ways. And we know that stress, anxiety, and sleep disorders, of course, they can change. They can lead to behavior changes. They can lead to tantrums. They can lead to aggression. And dysbiosis can also do this. I told you about the parasite, but that can happen with Candida and several Clostridium and several bacterial overgrowth. And inflammation, pain, and neuroinflammation can also lead to changes in behavior. So just by seeing this, the role of the microbiome, the role of inflammation, the role of lack of nutrients for the brain function, it really messes me. It really bothers me that these kids normally get treated only with behavioral therapies and some pharmaceuticals to control the symptoms. There's no pharmaceutical or not behavioral therapy that's going to deal with inflammation. So we really have to dig into the root causes and treat this kid behavioral to improve the kid with so that it doesn't have to treat the causes of this dysfunction. But there's more. Let's go to sleep. Between 13 and 86% of children with autism can present sleep disorders. We can have a problem with falling asleep, and we can have a problem with waking up in the middle of the night. And we all know that stress and anxiety can lead to sleep disorders, but sleep and disorders, of course, can lead to stress and anxiety. Who never didn't sleep and then the other day couldn't function? And the kids, this is especially true for kids. And sleep disorder can increase inflammation, neuroinflammation. Sleep is crucial, especially during deep sleep. There's a cleaning of the brain, so that there's an entrance of liquid, and there's a removal of waste products. So if the kid doesn't go through deep sleep, he's unable to clean up the brain. So it will have an increased inflammation the next day. Increased inflammation, increased stress and anxiety, sleep disorders, and the list goes on. And we all know that sleep disorders can alter, of course, because they don't sleep, can alter the microbiome. And the changes in microbiome can also change the sleep disorders. So many of our kids are stuck in this. They are stuck in this mess. So what we have to do, we have to deal. We have to deal with all of it. We have to start somewhere. We have to start small, but we have to take care of everything. So the kids start improving a bit at a bit, small pieces at a time. And oxidative stress is also a major one in autism, and many children in autism present elevated levels of several oxidative stress markers. This is a really nice chart, and it's a fresh one. So this puts me everything. It's a review paper. So here you have the oxidative stress indicators when you have lipid peroxide biomarkers, and the kids with autism, it's much bigger. And the protein oxidative biomarkers, also bigger in autism. And the DNA oxidation biomarkers, also much bigger in autism. And also the enzymes also changes in the autism group are major changes. And for instance, on the levels of glutathione also change. Of course, the kids of autism have lower levels of glutathione, and they have an increase in oxidized glutathione. Of course it is. So oxidative stress, it's also like inflammation is a big one. Oxidative stress is also a big part of autism's phenotype. And these are some of my kids. I found it funny that the values they found for this marker on the previous table, it was around 11. And most of my kids present this one, 6, 7, 9, 10. So it's kind of the same numbers. I found it funny, found it curious. And they also found not only those are the biomarkers, you can check them, but they also found in post-mortem studies the presence of oxidative lesions in autism in the brain regions associated with language, emotions, and social behavior. So the areas affected in autism in terms of behavior, in terms of symptoms, are the ones that presented the oxidative markers, oxidative marks. And why do they have oxidative stress? Of course, we can have several causes. We can have deficiency in various nutrients associated with the ability to detoxify, regulation of oxidative stress, inflammation, the function, a lack of a decrease in function of antioxidant enzymes because they lack the cofactors, because they have several polymorphisms, because of low levels of glutathione, low levels of phytonutrients, and etc. Lots of reasons. But they also can have an increase in oxidative stress because of excess calories, excess inflammation with excessive production of nitric oxide, propionate coming from the gut, inflammation, glucotoxicity, several environmental toxins, and oxidative stress, because oxidative stress propagates itself. If you don't control it, it keeps on going, keeps on going, keeps on going, because oxidative stress will increase inflammation, oxidative stress, and it keeps on going. Someone asked me before the role of heavy metals. I don't think it's huge, but I think it's the only one. I think there are so many that we have to tangle a lot of them and then go for the pieces. I will go for the big ones and then clean it up just a little more. We cannot do all at the same time. And on these kids, we have glutathione levels approximately 20 to 40% lower in autism, and a higher amount of oxidized glutathione. And this is also a nice article, a nice paper that connects, it really talks about the role of glutathione redox imbalance in autism spectrum disorder. So it really talks only about glutathione and the way it connects. It connects to the availability of glutamate, to the ability of glutathione to scavenge xenobiotics, to control oxidative stress, to help with mitochondrial function, and would help with inflammation. So glutathione, if you cannot do anything, improve glutathione. Start with that. And the brain is particularly vulnerable to oxidative stress. Why? Because it has a high composition on polysaturated fatty acids. It has a high oxygen use. It only has 2% of body weight, but uses around 20% of available oxygen. And it has a limited antioxidant defense mechanisms. The most defense mechanism of the brain is provided by the astrocyte. So if the astrocyte is not working, the neuron doesn't have a chance totally. And this is also a nice table. It really helps a lot. So it covers many things. So like I told you, in the beginning, we have several changes in mitochondrial function, but several environmental risk factors that can happen pre, peri, and postnatal. The toxin and toxicants, several toxicities, pharmaceuticals, infection, several genetic factors, several polymorphisms associated with glutathione metabolism, oxidative stress and detoxification pathways. They all combine to increase generation of oxidative stress and to the lack of antioxidant defense. They all contribute to oxidative stress. And of course, oxidative stress can lead to mitochondrial dysfunction, can lead to oxidation of several markers, increased inflammation, neuroinflammation, damage of brain tissue, all lead to autism. But they also lead to an altered immune response, inhibition of methionine synthetase. I'll talk about that in a while. But this will lead to a lower DNA capacity of DNA methylation that will lead to epigenetic dysregulation that can disrupt brain development, autoimmune dysfunction, gastrointestinal dysfunction. So give antioxidant to these kids, give them phytonutrients, give them color to their foods. I cannot have a kid only eating yellow, only eating gray foods. No, give him the reds, give him the blues, give him the oranges, give him color to the food. It will really help a lot. Support the glutathione. It will really help. And in terms of oxidative stress, like I told you, when you have a little bit, it's good. We need just a bit of oxidative stress. But when the oxidative stress is too much, you will end up increasing inflammation. And if it's really too much, it will induce apoptosis. And most of our kids are over here. They are not here, they are over here. So we really have to lower the oxidative stress. So oxidative stress will increase inflammation, neuroinflammation, and the other way around also. So oxidative stress, of course, is connected to the mitochondria because an increase in oxidative stress inside the cell will lead to mitochondrial dysfunction, and mitochondrial dysfunction will lead to an increase in oxidative stress. And when we have a mitochondrial dysfunction, we have a lower in energy production and we have a lower in the cellular and organic function. So the cell doesn't have energy to work. So if the cell doesn't have energy to work, a lot of things will fail. Of course it will. And in terms of mitochondria, I really like this chart because it tells me a lot. I really like it because it tells me the amount of mitochondria we have on several tissues. For instance, in the heart spends around 90% of total energy expended, but almost 42% of the tissue is mitochondria. So we have a lot of mitochondria doing a small amount of work, but the heart cannot fail. But when we're talking about the brain, it uses 22% of total energy expended, but it only has 5% of mitochondria. So we have few mitochondria doing a lot of work. So if the mitochondrial function is not doing well, the brain will suffer. That's why we have so many, that's why mitochondria is involved in neurodegeneration, neurodevelopment, and everything related to the brain, including psychiatric diseases. And the mitochondria is very vulnerable. It has vulnerability to endogenous and exogenous factors. It's vulnerable to oxidative stress, inflammation, nutritional deficiency. It cannot work without iron, or it cannot work without the B complex. It cannot work without Q10. Heavy metals is really susceptible to heavy metals, to pesticides, to environmental pollution, and some medication, and the list goes on. It was not enough to put in over here. So it's just an example. So have the mitochondria really susceptible to several things. And of course, there's evidence of mitochondrial dysfunction on these kids, between 5 and 50%. I would say there are much more. Most of my kids present to some form of mitochondrial dysfunction, not all, but most of them have it. And of course, here comes the organics again, comes the organic acid has. So this is another patient of mine. I think he has 3 or 4 years old. So in this patient, for instance, the fatty acid metabolism is stuck. He cannot use the carbohydrate metabolism is also locked up, is also stuck. And this is the Krebs cycle is also locked out. So this kid is not able to properly produce energy. So the brain doesn't have energy to work. And when you talk about neurodevelopment, that you need the neurons need energy to reach the other side, need the energy to connect to the other one, need energy to make new synapses, need energy to release neurotransmitters. Without any energy, the brain shuts down. It cannot learn. And now get back to methylation, another big one on autism. So methylation is crucial for several things. A lot of methyltransferases. Methyltransferases are enzymes that uses methyl groups to function. If you don't have an adequate amount of methyl groups, the methyltransferases don't have the material to work. So we have important methyltransferases for DNA. That's crucial for epigenetics. We have another for methylation of histones, also crucial for epigenetics. But for instance, for the degradation of catecholamine and for phase 2 biotransformation, we also need methyl groups. And we also need methyl groups for the conversion of noradrenaline to adrenaline. And we also need methyl groups for the synthesis of melatonin. And the list really goes on. So anytime you are reading some paper, you are reading about some biochemistry and some physiological pathway and a biochemistry pathway, and then you see methyltransferases at the name, remember methylation. Okay, remember methylation. Because if you don't have methyl groups in the amount necessary, it will fail. It will not work properly. And of course, children with autism have methylation disorders in association with an increase in oxidative stress markers. Why? Because these two pathways are connected. This pathway is the pathway of homocysteine. We have homocysteine converting to methionine and methionine converting back to homocysteine. This is where the SAMe, the major methyl donor, is formed. But and also homocysteine can go back down to form glutathione. So when there's an increase in oxidative stress inside the cell, methionine synthetase is an enzyme over here. So this enzyme blocks. So what the cell wants to do is to block this part so we can have available homocysteine to produce glutathione. And if the intracellular oxidative stress goes back to normal, everything goes back to normal and work. But if the intercellular oxidative stress still remains high, this will get blocked. That's why some kids really, really improve when you improve methylation, make it work. And this is another chart that tells me exactly that. So you have here the control children, the autistic children, and for instance, the amount of SAMe, the universal methyl donor, it's high, but the kids are really low in autism. And for instance, when you go over there to the oxidized glutathione, it's much bigger in autism, and the ratio between oxidized and reduced glutathione, of course, is lower because we have high amounts of oxidized glutathione. So this connection between methylation capacity and oxidized glutathione can also measure the SAMe status, the methylation status. And go now back to the neurotransmitters. I really like this image. It's not from a paper. I really found it funny, really simple, because if you want to form noradrenaline or dopamine, to convert tyrosine to all these the neurotransmitters, you need nutrients. Without adequate levels of vitamin B6, magnesium, etc., you cannot change them. You cannot take tryptophan, for instance, and produce serotonin. So if you have to have adequate amounts of these nutrients to be able to produce these neurotransmitters. So if you want to have huge amount, adequate amount of neurotransmitters production. You have to ensure they have a sufficient amount of amino acid precursors. If you remember the kid I told you about, the huge amount of protein degradation on the stool, and the one that has maybe amino acid deficiency, that kid may not have sufficient amount of amino acids to produce neurotransmitters. And we also need a bunch of cofactors. Sometimes the kid may not be able to produce the sufficient amount of amino acids, of neurotransmitters, because it doesn't have the sufficient cofactors. For instance, B6 is crucial to change glutamate to GABA. So if you have a lack of B6, you will not have a sufficient conversion between glutamate and GABA. And GABA is the excitatory, and glutamate is the excitatory, and GABA is the ones that it goes up, and the GABA will relax. So if he has a vitamin B6 deficiency, he may have an increasing GABA, an increasing glutamate, sorry, and the lower levels of GABA. And the gut-brain axis will always also change the production of the neurotransmitters in the brain. Inflammation not only from the gut-brain axis, but like I told you on the image of the glial cells, inflammation can lead to increased levels of glutamate in the middle with excitotoxicity, but also inflammation can do another thing. Inflammation, you have tryptophan, and tryptophan should be converted to serotonin. But if you have inflammation, this tryptophan can be converted to the kynurenate pathway. So you lack. You don't have enough, the tryptophan will be robbed to produce kynurenic acid, and you don't have enough to produce serotonin. And you need energy. You need energy because most of these neurotransmitters are at the top and the bottom of on the synaptic cleft, but you need energy to release the vesicles, because they are stored, and you need energy to bring them back and release them. And you need energy to bring them back on and recycle them. So if you don't have enough energy, you're not going to produce the neurotransmitters in the same way. And of course, oxidative stress can also block because in increased inflammation, it will disrupt mitochondria. And there are several polymorphisms. There are several polymorphisms in the receptors of dopamine, receptors of serotonin, the receptors for GABA. So we can look for all these polymorphisms that can change the efficacy and the function of these several neurotransmitters. And of course, between 3 and 44% of children may experience epilepsy at later age. It doesn't surprise me if we can imagine, now knowing that a lot of kids have dysbiosis, oxidative stress, excitotoxicity from excess glutamate due to neuroinflammation. I don't think this is a no-brainer. Of course, it will lead to epilepsy in the later life with so much mitochondrial dysfunction and so much neuroinflammation. And these are the major ones. I cover a little bit of the major ones. And the tricky thing is they're all connected, and everything influences one another. So we have to start everywhere, and everywhere the nutrition has a role in detoxification, has a role in gene, has a role in the immune system, helping the neuron on the GI tract, and oxidative stress, and of course the mitochondria. But sometimes with all this information and so many things, we kind of get lost. So how do we start? Where do we start? What do we do with so many things on these kids? Of course, we go to the tree. We go to the functional medicine tree, and we don't stay with the what does the kid have. He has autism. Yes, I know he has autism. We don't get settled with what does he have. We ask why, and the what goes even further. So what does he have? Does he have mitochondrial dysfunction? Does he have dysbiosis? Does he have allergies, food sensitivities? Because we have the most common pathological changes. So we're going to look in that kid with autism. We know that autism is prone. Most of the kids with autism may have deficiency in glutathione, oxidative stress, and etc. What I told you, we're going to look for that in that kid. And the why if the kid has it, and why. And we're going to look for the antecedents, the triggers, and the mediators present in this individual. They have conditioned the manifestation of the changes found. What happened in the life of this kid? How was the pregnancy of this kid? What happened after birth? What was the trigger? What changed his behavior? What happened? Because knowing all this will tell you where to start, how to start, what to look for, and what to do. It will give you a roadmap where to do, what to do. And because we are talking about functional medicine and functional nutrition, we start with the root: sleep and relaxation, exercise and movement, nutrition, stress, and relationships. So we already talked about the sleep disorders. There are really lots of kids have it. So we ask why. Why does he have a sleep disorder? Is only behavioral or is physiological? Does he have excitotoxicity and low GABA production? Does he lack B6? Does he need magnesium? Does he have brain inflammation? Does he need help with the melatonin production, with improving methylation? Why can nutrition help? And exercise and movement. Does he move? Why not? It's only behavioral, or doesn't he have any energy? Is the mitochondrial function so bad that he cannot move? He doesn't have ability to move his muscle? That he has lack of coordination due to poor neuronal function? Why and how can nutrition help? And of course, food. Do we have a picky eater, or do we have a kid with lots of sugar, or we have a kid with lots of gluten and dairy in the middle? And if he has a picky eating, why? It's only behavioral, or do we have maybe we have some pain? Maybe the kid doesn't eat because he feels pain. Maybe we are dealing with sensory overload. Maybe due to, for instance, lack of deficiency in Z can lead to increase in sensory overload. Or maybe he has nutritional deficiency that the food doesn't take to anything. So why and how can nutrition help? Of course, nutrition can help in finding the root causes, but can also help with lots of imagination to try to put the nutrients inside the food. So it's really, really, really a game of imagination sometimes. And the main target and the first target is to healthy eating for everyone. That's the basic foundation. And for me, healthy eating means nutritionally dense, means avoiding the ingestion of molecules that interfere with metabolism, which may aggravate the present alterations, namely pesticides, heavy metals, and some food additives. So organic with none of these things. And I'll be using food as information, modulating hormone production, immune effects, and nutrigenomic effects. And someone asks before how I make it easy for the kids to do the diets. Imagination, give them really, really good options. I think I don't know how many times, for how long I have Newzest available for the kids. So it really helped me a lot, Newzest protein, because you can give them chocolate milk and vanilla milk without milk. So it helped me a lot with the flavor. So when in the appointment, I present the fathers with an enthusiasm and such ideas and recipes that will help. Of course, sometimes it really takes time. And as I was saying, healthy eating is for everyone. It's the basic foundation. And then we have several diets in autism. We have the elimination diets, controlling glycemic index, the low carb, low oxalate, the GAPS, the FODMAPs, mitochondrial function, cetogenic diet, low histamine diet. When will I apply? Depends on the kid. Individualized, can be short of long duration. So it really, really depends on the diet. And someone asked me also before, how about the FODMAP diets and the GAPS? How do you make it? Again, with help. For instance, one thing I have at Nordic Clinic is a patient educator. So my patient educator really helps them with recipes, and we give them recipes, and we support the parents with ideas and recipes to make it easier for them. It's not easy, this diet, but if you make it funny and tasty, it's much easier to do it. And of course, I start with this one. I have to say, this is the one to go for me for the first time. I always start with the gluten and casein and soy-free diet. For me, it's the best one to be implemented. And most of my kids do good. Not all of them improve with this diet, but I would say 60% to 70% have some kind of improvement with the diet. And I also have the tool of nutritional genomics, where I can give food to target the genes, to upregulate genetic expression and to downregulate genetic expression that I don't want. So I work also with food to improve the gene expression, but I also get to know the genes to adapt the food and the nutritional supplements to the kid. So according to tests, I can give them more magnesium, I can give them more folate, methylfolate, I can give them more B12 or more vitamin D in cases of vitamin D deficient, vitamin D resistance genetically. And if you also want to start, this is an easy one. So you can have significant improvement in autistic symptoms just with sulforaphane. So give them broccoli, give them brassica. And if the kid doesn't eat, we have a very good supplement, Broccolox, that's really easy to use and it's tasty. So we have a huge amounts of sulforaphane. Sulforaphane can really, really help these kids. It's not the only one, of course, but it can really help. You can start with this. And Nutrigenetics is really good to know the genetic susceptibility of this kid. If he has difficulties with detoxification, if he has difficulties with oxidative stress and with the methylation enzyme and the enzymes involved in the folate metabolism. So it's really good to know so we can optimize enzyme function and modulate the metabolic pathway involved. Increase the needs, increase choline, increase folate, because and then what we do when we get to know the genetic susceptibilities, all the different polymorphisms, we can decrease or increase cofactors and precursors. You can decrease or increase genetic expression of the enzyme of the molecule. You can optimize the other associated metabolic pathways. So you can play a little bit in order to improve this kid's biochemistry. And stress, the other one. Several kids have several tantrums, and you can also have dealing with several sensory processing, so sensory overload, so it will increase the stress of the kid. And again, why does he have stress? Sometimes it's a type of behavior. I remember perfectly seeing 2 videos of a kid have on therapy that stressed me out because the mother and the professional was doing, do it, just do it, put the hand, say it. Don't scream at the child. The child was screaming. Of course he was crying. It was under stress. You don't do that. So maybe we are dealing that, or maybe it's psychological. I told you that the gut microbiome can increase adrenaline production. I told you that inflammation can do that. I told you that lack of sleep can do that. So why and how can nutrition help dealing with all the other stuff? And how is the relationship of this kid? Is he isolated? Can he communicate? Is he always screaming at him and with him? Is he bullied? This is not nutrition, but it's another type of nutrition. It's comprehending and talking to the parents and saying, okay, this is worsening. Please deal with this. This is not nutrients, but it's love. It's another acceptance. It's another kind of nutrition. And now do I organize all my stuff? I put it on the matrix. Everyone that knows the IFM knows this is the functional, is the functional medicine matrix from IFM. So I put all the stories, I put all the antecedents, the triggers and the mediators on this part. On this part, I will put all the things I found out on the modifiable personal factors, the root causes, the sleep, the movement, the nutrition, the stress and the relationship. And then we'll go to this one, the clinical imbalances. So in this kid, we have to know how is the gut? Is he absorbing the nutrient? Is he digesting? How's the microbiome? How is everything? How is the immune system? Is he inflamming? Are we having the neuroinflammation? How is detoxification? Does he have detoxification impairment in terms of genetic? Does he lack the nutrients to do the detoxification? Someone asks me about the heavy metals. Of course is important, but it's not the only one. It's not the only one. There are a lot of things that increase, that needs to be detoxified. How is the mitochondria of that kid? How is the hormonal production? I have a lot of kids with really, really low levels of cortisol. And I have, for instance, how's the synapses? Is he able to produce neurotransmitters the way he needs to? How's the transport? Does he have insulin resistance? Because if he has insulin resistance, insulin cannot do its job at the brain. And for instance, if he has a lot of trans fatty acids, the membrane, the mitochondrial membrane and the membrane of the cell is not fluid, so it will not work the same way. And does he have a leaky gut? Does he have a leaky brain? We have to evaluate and optimize. So there's a lot to do on these kids. So how do we start? We start by asking if, relating to the antecedents, we can remove, treat, modulate, optimize. And in terms of this, the roots, can we treat, improve, modulate? And these ones, it needs really more detailed analysis and studies for the nutritional treatments targeted to these functions found. And like I told you in the beginning, during pregnancy, we have several windows of vulnerability, and during and post-birth, we have also several windows of vulnerability. So I think it's time that we look at these windows of vulnerability and start seeing them as windows of opportunity. So it's a wrap. Thank you so much. If you need anything from me, I'm easy to find. I'm part of the Nordic family, so if anything you need, I'll be available. And I think we have some time for answering questions. I was not talking too fast, right?
You are talking fast, and we are all sitting here, but we can hear what we are saying, and lots of questions have come in.
You can watch the recordings.
Exactly. So, and everyone is saying, wow, amazing presentation, your passion comes in, and excellent, and so on. But there are questions. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm just going to take them from one end to the next. One was asking in regards to obesity, if it was purely the BMI that was the risk factor, or if there's also been looked into insulin resistance and so on in the mother.
I think they didn't specify, because obesity is really one of the major risk factors. I don't think they specify. They just talk about obesity, but we are really talking about obesity, not the little overweight. We are talking about obesity.
But even in obesity, we know there's insulin resistance.
No,
we know that
it's a major one.
Inflammation.
Yes, that's it. It's a major one. So, and don't forget that insulin resistance can also change so many things that mostly they didn't analyze. They just talk about obesity, but I'm pretty sure most of them must have lots of insulin resistance.
Exactly. So another one asked in regards to, now you mentioned at the end, an oxalate reduced diet. Mm-hmm. There's some in regards to oxalate and yeast. I don't know if you have anything to share in regards to.
Yeah, because when you have yeast, you have an increase in oxalate production. And also oxalate, if you have a healthy gut, the oxalate will not be absorbed. So when you have yeast, you have leaky gut, and then you have an increase in oxalate production inside. So we have to do it not only a low oxalate diet. You have to look for the yeast, and you have to treat everything in between. It's always one.
These some of the symptoms in regards to oxalate is very often that when the kids eat, they want to go away from the table. They can't really be in their own body. Their ears go very red, and it's very not comfortable for them.
You can test them in the stool. You can test them.
You can test the oxalates as well, yeah.
But I like to start with seeing if there's a Candida. So not remove them, because I cannot go to everything at the same time. So I really start with the gluten-free diet and the dairy-free diet and give them food, give them real food, and work on the Candida and work my way out of it. Because you cannot go all the way. It's a child, so you have to work on it really slow. So I'm not going to in the first appointment or the second appointment, okay, gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, oxalate-free. No, it's impossible. So it depends. It goes.
And also sometimes the kids, like in Denmark, we have this rye bread with the liver pate on. And I remember once I had a patient, that's all he ate the whole day. So the first step was to make the bread gluten-free and the liver pate gluten-free, dairy-free. And then try and maybe make the bread better, put bone broth into the bread recipe, and like being a little bit.
Put tomato on the recipe, put carrots on the recipe, put nutrition. And some kids, I have some kids that appear eating everything, but some kids are really picky. So some kids are really easy to do it. So it really kind of depends on the kid. But I think the most important is to check if there's Candida or yeast overgrow, because that can be, you can start slowly. This is not a one-way fix. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon. So you work your way around, including there was also a previous a question about the mineralogram, the hair elements. I normally don't start with that, because I think it's much better to start with the organic acid test, because it gives me a whole picture, or the stool analysis. But then I will work on the intestinal permeability, on the genetic, and then I will go to because if the kid has a lack of B12 or is not able to methylate and is not able to produce glutathione, how good does it? Of course, he's not getting rid of metals. So first I'll give him the pieces. First I'll give him the right amounts. I'll give the glutathione, and then I will check.
So a very typical, if you do a hair test on an autistic kid to begin with, is that it's relatively low in heavy metals, and it's also very low in nutrients. And then when you start working on it, you can maybe see an increase in the heavy metal excretion through the hair, because you're supporting the detoxification, and they're getting more nutrients, so all the minerals comes higher up. But just so that you have an idea of what to look at.
Sometimes you see some parents come, are so worried about heavy metals, and they came with hair analysis, and oh, it's all green. You say, okay, it's all green, it's impossible. So they're inside.
That's not a good sign. They did a study where they took the child's first haircut in normally developing children and in autistic children, and then they compared the amount, and the autistic children in the hair actually had less heavy metals than the normally developing children. And then the theory is, and the discussion is, that it's because they're not detoxifying optimally. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's why it's not a go-to for me in the beginning. I prefer the other ones. I can do something about it and give him the basics. That's why I really love the organic acid test.
So then another question came into, so that's of course yeast and candida in the body, but of course then there's a whole like fungi and mold in the environment. And we actually have a webinar on the YouTube channel on mold and mold toxicity, where a lot of kids also with autism are being tested for mold toxicity, because that's really something that a challenge as well. So I just wanted to answer that one. Do you have a comment to that?
Yeah, that's it. Because on the Nordic Laboratories YouTube, there has a lot of presentation, including one of organic acids. You have an interview with Richard Lord, the creator.
Yay.
So, I think I just passed in the beginning. I just went above like an airplane, passing through. So just to let you know all the kind of dysfunction there can be, but we can really be spending a week talking about what you can find in autism and the experience and all that can be done. So this is just a trigger. It's a thrill, a trigger. Not. I'm looking for the word.
Appetizer. So I just wanted to say, and that's just from my clinical experience, and Daniela, of course, you may experience something else, but if you do start working with autistic kids and you use an organic acid test, then the pictures they're very much high, they're different, as Daniela says. But there's a lot of stuff going on there that needs to be addressed. And then when you do a follow-up test 4 to 6 months later, maybe, it may look even worse. I'm just preparing you. And it's because the body somehow, and I've discussed this with Richard Lord, because I remember the first time way back when I started working with these autistic children, I went to him and I said, I've done all this, I've given the kid all these things, why does it look worse? And I was just like heartbroken. And we sat down and he was like, well, it's the functions in the body that's starting. So just carry on, adjust the dosages and carry on. And actually and I've seen several times now that it's like maybe I go through 4 or 5 organics tests, and then suddenly when the organics test starts looking normal, that's when the kid has a breakthrough. This doesn't happen with all the kids, but I've just seen it several times throughout the years. I don't know if you have seen similar experience.
For instance, when you start supplementation, sometimes I normally tell the parents, be aware, because I normally start one at a time, half the dose and then the full dose on the second day, and you only put another one 3 days after. And sometimes I always check, see if the increase in symptoms, it goes all the way, or does it stop, it goes down. Because sometimes they are adapting to the new function. They can function better. I normally give the information when I took my car to be checked. When I left, I hit the brakes and my car did this. I said, okay, my brakes were bad. I was braking too much. So that happens with the autistic kids. So it's not working well. So when he starts doing the same, he speeds. He speeds. So he's adapting to the new reality. Okay, I have more energy. I'm able to do this. I'm able to be aware of the environment. So he can overreact some symptoms, but it's a good sign. He's breaking through. And yes, we can do a lot of things with these kids. In 10 years, I've seen a lot of things. So it really breaks my heart that we don't see every kid like this.
Exactly.
It really breaks my heart.
I think everyone has, I think they've all seen your passion. I think they've all had their feet wiped a little bit away from underneath them, because of course what you have just been able to present in a little bit more than an hour has been this amazing overview of functional medicine. Because treating autistic kids, you need to know your biochemistry, you need to know your functional medicine, you need to understand what areas you need to address. And it's a puzzle. And in the Autism Research Institute, or they have this, like with cancer, it's a pink bow, and with autism, it's a bow as well, but it's with a puzzle on in different colors, because each kid is so different. And each treatment is so different. And what we do this year is not necessarily what we have to do the next year with the kids, and so on. So appetizer, it for sure was. And hopefully we will see more to Daniela in this, because
trying to speak all of that because I wanted to cover a little bit of everything. So
you've
really
done an excellent job.
The dysfunctions and the treatment, and you really need to work. I once heard something, I think it was on IFM, about the biochemistry. Is learning the pathways is like learning the dance steps, left, right, left, right, left, right. It's boring, but it's left, right, left, right. But then when you learn the steps, you dance, you do the choreographies. And you have to know the steps to do the choreography and the dance. And that's when we are working with this, we already know the steps. So we are dancing with the kid. We are working the biochemistry to the left, to the right. Let's do this, let's do that. Let's join together. And it's a lot, that's the matrix really helps me, because there's so much information. How do I put it all together in all the places? And some kids are really, really tough.
Yeah. But you're working hard, and thank you for sharing all your knowledge to all the practitioners here. And we will share the recording from today.
I'm hearing something like muito obrigada. Muito obrigada in Portuguese.
Obrigada, that's the Portuguese word for thank you, right? Obrigada.
Obrigada, obrigada. It's the girls. The girls say obrigada. The guys say obrigado.
That's it. There you go.
Yeah,
language lesson as well.
the ladies will say obrigada. The guys say obrigado.
Exactly. So I just want to pay your attention to the next webinar, which is on the 4th of March, 4 o'clock Copenhagen time, Central European time, and it's on our new test, DNA Smile. So genetics in regards to oral health and oral health in regards to systematic health. So hopefully I will see some of you then and there as well. If nothing else, I hope you will tune into our recordings on the DNA Live Nordic Labs YouTube channel.
Yes,
Daniela?
that's also good. And one of the tests I use, I normally use the DNA Mind with DNA Health. I join them together. We have to work on a DNA autism.
Yeah, I think we have to do some more education. Would you like that, everyone?
Yeah.
We'll do that. Okay, but thank you very much, Daniela, for your time and your passion and your
See you
presentation.
next time. It was
Thank you, everyone up there on the screens who's still staying tuned. See you soon. Write to us if you have questions. We will write to you with a recording on the slides. Bye.
Thank you so much, everybody. It was a pleasure. Bye. 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 Bye.
So, thank you.